Shell ordered to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 in landmark ruling.
Here's a summary of the article.
Multinational oil company Royal Dutch Shell has been ordered in court to cut its carbon emissions in order to protect the environment from climate change. The court ruled that the Anglo-Dutch energy giant has a duty of care to reduce emissions and that its current reduction plans are not concrete enough. The historic verdict was handed down at the District Court of The Hague against Royal Dutch Shell, in a case brought by environmentalist and human rights groups including Friends of the Earth in the Netherlands. The campaigners' lawyers brought the case on the grounds that Shell had breached its legal duty of care and violated human rights. Shell was the 9th biggest polluter in the world in 1988 to 2015, according to the Carbon Majors database. Last year Shell committed to go net zero by 2050, which covers emissions from its operations as well as use of its oil and gas. The campaigners believe Shell has refused to take any responsibility for the destruction of our society and climate, which is why it has taken Shell to court to answer for their actions.
This post received a score of 51,000, with an upvote ratio of 92%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Need clarification. Which emissions are we speaking of? The emissions created in the process of drilling and refining oil? Or is this about the emission of the oil it sells?
Everything, including the emission of the oil it sells. That was the real question. We already knew Shell had to reduce its own emissions. The question was if Shell is also responsible for the emissions of the oil it sells.
I am perplexed how Shell would ever begin to tackle this. I mean, the obvious answer is pump 45% less oil. Any possible downstream solution seems to revert back to this basic concept: if automakers make more FEVs and EVs to improve mileage, we use less oil. If fossil fuel power plants are replaced by renewable sources, we use less oil. How does Shell possibly influence these results other than by refusing to sell them oil? In which case, does the Dutch Gov have a plan in place to replace half of all their power and transportation with renewable energy in the next 9 years? Or are they just deflecting the blame onto Shell? Seems that a smart politician would attack the demand side rather than the supply side.
NP. The judge said Shell needs to diversify its energy portfolio. So it needs to sell more zero-emission fuels. The government gives subsidies to Shell for projects around zero-emission fuels. An example is a big hydrogen factory. Shell wasn't sued by the government. Shell was sued by an organization.
Well, whether they replace that 45% oil with hydrogen or not, still means they'd need someone to buy all that hydrogen. They are back to being dependent on creating demand, while their customers can just get their oil from someone else.
Shell is by far the biggest petrol station company in the Netherlands. If the government finds a way to subsidize green transportation so it's even slightly cheaper, us greedy Dutch bastards are lining up to get a green vehicle supply, and demand always has worked, even if we need to have an oversupply for some time.
Greater than greedy Dutch bastards, there are only two things I can't stand in this world: people who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch.
IDK if people are tired of that reference or don't get it. But either way, fuck Emedit. They were at like -5 when I commented, so my comment no longer makes sense.
They don't get it. They're like 15 years old.
In 2015, a Dutch judge ordered our cabinet to do more against climate change in what was then a landmark case as well, the Urgenda case, if anyone's interested. So this ruling does not come as a complete surprise, but it is for sure a welcome one. Fun fact, in both of these cases, the accusing party was represented by the same lawyer, Roger Cox.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.